Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Well, we're continuing our examination, review, and refutation of Sam Frost's book, The Parousia of the Son of Man. I suggested to you in the last video on this book that Sam Frost made what I consider to be an absolutely fatal admission, and that is his comments on John the Baptizer as Elijah. He says on page 14, the eschatological coming of Elijah then is John the Baptist, unquote. Well, amen and amen. But Mr. Frost makes some claims concerning John as Elijah that are really quite disturbing and that have literally no basis in the text. You see, Elijah was supposed to come before the coming of the great and the terrible day of the Lord. Malachi chapter 4, verse 5 and 6. On page 12, Sam Frost says, quote, John the Baptist mouths, he who is coming, or the coming one, Matthew 3:11. The Baptist appears somewhat taken back when Jesus asked for a baptism. John does not understand the request, for he had been preaching a fire and brimstone message of the coming one that would, when he arrived, immediately set all wrongs right, as was the expectation that we find in Luke 19:11. We find the same concern of John expressing to some extent doubt in Matthew 11:2 when he asks, are you the coming one, or should we look for another? The arrival of Jesus, who is the coming one present with them, has taken on a dimension that apparently was unexpected. There was no wrath, fire, and brimstone with his advent, unquote. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest to you as kindly as possible and as respectfully as possible that Mr. Frost is guilty of the worst sort of eisegesis here, reading into the text that something that is simply not there. Was John confused about the role of Jesus? The text nowhere suggests that. Was John taken aback that Jesus wanted to be baptized of him, since, this is Frost's critical point, John expected Jesus to come in judgment and flaming fire? Wait a minute, folks. That's reading into the text. There's not a single word in the accounts of Jesus' baptism by John that suggests that John was confused. Oh, wait a minute. You're coming as a meek, mild, humble, obedient man. I thought you were going to come as in flaming fire. What are you doing coming to be baptized? No, folks. That, quote, confusion, and it's not a good word, on the part of John stems from the fact that John had told his audience, there is one coming after me whose shoe latchets I am not worthy to unloose. John realized that Jesus was righteous. He was holy. He did not need, pardon me, he did not need to be baptized for the remission of sin like everyone else did. John's supposed confusion had nothing to do with, wait a minute, Jesus, why are you coming out here as an humble, obedient servant? You ought to be coming as the judge. Was Jesus going to come in fulfillment of John's message? And John's message was the great and the terrible day of the Lord. Well, of course he was. But you see, folks, that doesn't mean that John did not understand his own mission. Here's what you absolutely have to catch. We'll develop this over the next few videos because, you see, investigating Elijah and talking about Elijah is one of my very, very favorite subjects. It's sort of kind of why I wrote this book, Elijah Has Come, a Solution for Romans 11:25-27. What you absolutely must understand is that John was not the herald of the incarnation of Jesus. John was the voice, he was the messenger, and he was Elijah. Now, Mr. Frost admits that he was Elijah. He admits he was the voice. I would assume that he would admit that Jesus was also the messenger of Malachi chapter 3. Okay, I'm only going to make this point very, very quickly. I'm going to expand on it in ensuing videos as I examine Mr. Frost's admissions concerning John as Elijah. Okay? Jesus was the voice of one crying in the wilderness. Prepare ye the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Isaiah 40, verses 1 and following. Couple of real quick points here. Isaiah chapter 40 was predicting the coming of the Lord to take away Israel's sin, which is the source of Daniel's prophecy of the 70 weeks. 70 weeks were determined to take away Israel's sin. Okay? So here's Isaiah 40, the coming of the Lord to take away Israel's sin. Daniel 9, the 70 weeks are determined to take away Israel's sin. Oh, but that's not all. You have to understand that this language of the coming of the Lord, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God, is the language of warfare. It is not the language of preparing for a nice, peaceful, humble coming of anyone. Going all the way back to the time of the Assyrians, when roads were built into foreign countries to prepare for the coming of the king, it was an invasion. And by the way, we can document that from Josephus, where the Romans built highways for the siege of Jotapata. But enough on that. But what is the coming of the Lord, for which the voice, i.e. John the Baptizer, would herald, prepare ye the way of the Lord? Well, Isaiah 40, 10 through 11, the Lord would come in judgment and reward and the kingdom. That's not the incarnation. This is the coming of the Lord in judgment, in reward. John was the voice. John, as the voice, was not preparing, and his mission was not to prepare for the incarnation. Now, did he point people to Jesus? Of course. I'm not denying that. But is that the coming of the Lord that was the focus of John's ministry and message? No, it was not. Not if he's the voice to prepare the way of the Lord for the coming of the Lord in the judgment and the reward and the kingdom of Isaiah chapter 40, the time of the taking away of Israel's sin. Oh, by the way, Mr. Frost says that John was preparing for, the coming of the Lord that was partially hidden. Well, yes, it wasn't fully revealed. But again, that's not the purpose and the point of Isaiah chapter 40. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 5. The coming of the Lord that the voice would declare and prepare for was the time in which all flesh shall see the salvation of the Lord. Not a hidden kingdom. All flesh shall see the salvation of the Lord. And you know what? I'm already out of time. Okay, so in the next video, I will go to Malachi chapter 3 and show that John, as Elijah, as Mr. Frost admits, is the eschatological figure of Elijah. Well, he's also the eschatological figure of the messenger. And the messenger said of Yahweh, I will come near to you in judgment. Now, it's interesting that Mr. Frost admits and cites that passage, but he completely overlooks, completely ignores the application and the focus of that judgment, as well as the time of that judgment. But I'm going to share that with you in our next video in response to Mr. Frost. In the meantime, get a copy of my book, Elijah Has Come, A Solution for Romans 11:25-27. I want to tell you something. The appearance of John the Baptizer as Elijah is one of the most incredibly significant, but most often commonly overlooked eschatological facts, tenets, elements that can possibly be imagined. The appearance of John as Elijah proves beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the resurrection, the judgment, the kingdom, the coming of the Lord was to be in the first century. Get a copy of my book. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, and order the book, and I'll pay your shipping. All right? Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic weekend. Be safe. Lord willing, we'll see you on Monday.